Jonathon, it is great to have you back on the show. Why? Because we had a great conversation before about what you do with development digital products, but now you've got a new book. Your company's growing like crazy, and you're working with all these really interesting companies. So why don't you tell the audience what you're doing that's new and what we're going to dive into?
Sure. Well, thank you again for having me back on the show, David. And it's just been fantastic last year with just the growth of the company. We're seeing more demand for companies wanting to get into the digital product and services space, going through incredible transformations, which has been just so exciting for all of us here at Emerge and the work that we're doing. And the new book is called Alignment: Overcoming Internal Sabotage and Digital Product Failure, and helping provide a framework for a lot of entrepreneurs coming into the space, as well as for seasoned executives and leaders that are growing rapid and large scale organizations, and how they can really connect to make these things happen. And so a lot of my time has been helping, coaching leaders, working with entrepreneurs, and helping them understand how they can apply this critical thinking to overcome some of the challenges that they've had in their businesses.
Great. Well, what stories do you have for us? I mean, there's got to be, I don't know. When I think of that, I think of my own background. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I don't know what you're finding out there.
Well, I think you nailed it. I really wanted to prepare and bring some great content here for the listeners of the show. And so I really thought about, what kind of stories could we talk about today about companies that are really struggling, and what does that look like? Talking about what's happening when a company overcomes the odds and is able to finally have a breakthrough moment, and what transformation successfully can look like when you really come out on the other side of this. And so we can dive into one or all three of those today and really, I think, unpack some really important aspects of what it takes to be successful in today's market.
Well, I really like the progression of bad, good, better. But can you give me a little hint as to, when we get to that better, just how good is that?
Well, in that case, in 18 months, we were able to help that client not only work through delivering a new product, but actually able to increase the revenue by $400 million.
Whoa, I call that good.
That was good.
I call that good. Yeah.
So in this particular case, what great looks like is we were able to help a company grow in over $400 million of unrecognized revenue within their existing customer base, which was just a phenomenal result to really see growth that they're trying to push for year over year right now.
Yeah, I'll take it. No problem. So, but why don't we do this? Let's start with the failure, because, a lot of people are struggling. They're struggling where to start. And once they get started, do we keep going? And that type of thing. So let's start with some negativity, but know that $400 million payday is out there for somebody that, follows your advice, works with your company, whatever. So.
Sure. So in the case of failure, I think it's, not an uncommon situation where, we came in to really work with this client and help them develop a product that needed to, get out to market. They had a really, deadline, that they had created for themselves where it had to get out there. They had some regulation considerations. And just for context, this is a global manufacturer, a brand that everybody probably listening to this, most people have in their closet that they, are familiar with. And it's one of those challenges where everybody had the best of intentions. You had so many really smart, really good people working to solve a really critical problem, but it started to break down really early and really fast. And in that experience, you started to realize that there wasn't any alignment. Nobody had a clear vision or direction of what success needed to look like. So nobody knew how to make decisions in the right way. You had people arguing over direction and over priorities. And the organization itself was assigning teams to be a part of the project that had conflicting, performance metrics. And so it was just from the onset, just a bit of a mess. And
but how does that happen? You basically you decide to do a product, and so just to clarify, can you put a little more meat on the bone as to, without divulging the company, what type of product this was? But you kind of like, we're doing this product to accomplish X, isn't it? How do people get so mixed up?
Well, it started with the company was more in love with the idea of the product than they were with understanding the problem that they were solving for customers. And that was the first kind of fundamental point of failure. I mean, that really was a challenge because they were designing and creating product based off of preference and not based off of actually solving a customer problem or meeting a need. And so everybody had a different opinion, and there was nothing to reconcile that opinion against, where there was a really clear, North Star or, direction, if you will, for why this product needs to exist, how it's going to benefit the end customer, and if it benefits the customer, how in turn it generates revenue for the company. And so these fundamental pieces were missing, and that happens a lot. I mean, startups have a wonderful idea, they fall in love with this idea, and they forget that there's no market fit without actually having, something that really creates value, something that's useful to people. And big companies fall into those traps just as well, sometimes even more so. And so in this case, it was just such a significant challenge of really understanding that. And you could see it, just the good intentions of so many, and then just it over time, as the deadlines got closer and closer, it became toxic. I think another really good example that you could see as the symptoms of these issues were around, we would talk about what it means to be customer centric, something that I think a lot of people can relate to. I would tell you that we're probably, out of the 50 plus people that were working on this particular, product, there must have been 10 different definitions of what that meant.
Wow.
So how are you supposed to create a customer centered product if everybody has a different interpretation of what that even means? So you might as well have everybody speaking a different language. It was so problematic that just the fundamentals were getting missed along the way. And it just kept getting amplified and snowballing as things were pushed forward.
So, Jonathan, it strikes me, I'm reminded of the Lean Startup book, and where, it's like do a small step, confirm it's okay, then do the next step. It sounds like, and I've made this mistake in the past. Okay. So this is the kettle calling the pot black. So that they were kind of looking at the long thing and trying to shoot this long thing versus kind of do a piece, confirm, and then confirm the next step, so everybody could stay on the same page. Am I hearing you correctly?
That's a huge part of it. Absolutely, David. So, if things weren't being taken incrementally, and where they were, what was happening also, which was really interesting in this particular case, is they weren't looking at the whole picture because they were so focused on these arbitrary deadlines and goals that were being set. Somewhat degree of arbitrary, I should say, that they lost their perspective along the way. So, what happens is if you can't step out of your own shoes, you start to grab information that confirms your beliefs or the things that you want, and you build a case. And people do this in their lives all over the place. This is just human nature. But it's human nature that absolutely can be just destructive in a product environment where our entire job is to step outside of our shoes and bring perspective to create better products. And so, when you're falling in love with the idea, not the problem you're solving, you're just losing objectivity that is so critical. And it really is difficult. Leaders fall into this challenge all the time, as well as individuals that make up the product team. And so that space wasn't being held for, in this case, the product team to be successful. And massive investments were made going down paths that inevitably had to be completely reworked, which meant the project and deadlines were blown out of the water. Budgets ran, way over, and you had.
All right. This is getting too painful. This is getting too painful.
It's pretty bad. It's bad.
So let's move on. What's the like this average or reasonable win level before we get to the $400 million knock it out of the park type of thing?
So in this case, I thought, what a great story at the time to talk about a hospital and a healthcare group. And there's this group, they are phenomenal at taking care of patients. They're just amazing. But
Yeah.
all of a sudden, digital became, in the last few years, the legitimate front door for healthcare, and not just a way to access your healthcare, but actually a way where those services are being provided. And so, what digital
Well,
products
yeah,
and services mean? Whew.
with the pandemic, for a while there, you couldn't even go see a doctor. They wouldn't even let you come in unless you had COVID,
Right.
which was nuts. I mean, but anyway, that's my opinion. But
if you're not going through the emergency room, you're probably not getting services maybe at all. It's every version of that, at some level, we've all heard about or experienced ourselves. And again, what was fundamentally missing was alignment, and they had been stuck for 2 years. So this started for them, pre-COVID, even trying to figure out how do they engage and deliver a better product and experience to their patients, in this case, and the customers of healthcare. And that was, really when they needed to find the win, what they had to really do is they had to step back and say, okay, we work in an incredibly complex ecosystem. We have tons and tons of stakeholders with physicians and multiple clinics and all of these things that are going on. If we could boil this down to the essence of what we need to do, what could that look like? And they needed some help to look at that. What are the things that are really important? Well, I need to find information quickly. I need to know if I can get an appointment with a physician or a care provider. I need to know how to schedule and book that. And I need clear directions on next steps, especially today.
Yeah.
And so what we did is we looked at, their website became much more than just a website. It wasn't a marketing tool anymore. It's literally how they were delivering services for telehealth and access to medical records and all these things. And we boiled it down. We looked at what were the 4 most essential things that they needed to enable people to do on that website to have a good healthcare experience. And also, by stepping into the patient's shoes, understanding there are people with a lot of questions today, a lot of fear and concerns. If they are sick, they're dealing with pain or discomfort, or maybe the care of a loved one. This can't be academic and it can't be medical, filled with medical jargon. It has to be humanized. You have to make connection.
So I wish I could compare yours to mine, which I get through Blue Shield, and it's a major medical group, and it's a mess that I have today. So I'm curious, though, if we go back to the disaster example, when you help these people implement this, you obviously help them on the front end to be very clear on the 4 outcomes they wanted to achieve. But how did you structure the phase in so you had kind of buy-in as you went step by step?
So I think that's where, clarity becomes so important. Everybody needs the right information to make good decisions in building, that buy-in that you're talking about. And we see a lot of times that, what is necessary is a couple of really critical things to build that buy-in. One is you have to have a very clear destination orientation of where you're going. 2, you have to have leadership has to be bought in. If leadership doesn't believe in it, it's not getting the resources and support it needs. And so is the organization actually aligned to provide the research support necessary to develop a successful product? And a lot of times that's not quite there. There's a missing component. And so that's really key that, the organization is behind it. Third is really making sure that the current state is understood. And what I mean by that is, what are the challenges that have to be overcome? And if you're to create a product and a solution to solve them, what's the impact of those challenges and problems on a customer? What does that look like? And if you understand that, you know where to focus in solving that problem. And you may not be able to solve them all, but if you can solve a couple key things in the right way, you can have huge impacts on the abilities of what an organization can accomplish. And then we use data. So in this particular story, one of the things, we took one of the tasks as it was, and we said, okay, there's a 70% failure rate on average of people being able to find, a care solution. That's pretty atrocious if you think about, like, this is your front door. And we were able to come up with a couple of concepts, go back out to patients and to other providers that are part of the network. We were able to improve that by 300%.
So I want to jump in there because you said you went back out to patients. So I've done software development since I guess 1991 or something. I don't know. So, but one of the things I find is that developers are great at developing code, but they're not always the best on testing code. And then when you only have like the project lead looking at the code that's being developed and the UI and the rest of it, it flows really well. But when you throw actual users or potential users on it, they do things that you just don't think of. And it sounds like you put that in the mix so you could nail that early on instead of, okay, here it is, and oops.
It's huge. I think, to build great products, customers or your prospective customers need to be a part of the process. They're not the receivers of the product. They're actually, part of helping identify what the product needs to be successful. I don't know a great product that, can establish market fit without creating some level of value. That value, whether it's financial value or maybe, status, if that's important, whatever it is, that value is something that, customers can help identify and inform. And you're still the creator as the business or as the product team. You get to create, what is that solution? How can we solve that problem in some sort of unique way? But you need to get those customers involved. You need also, by having them involved, you get to, unlock new insights. You get to get more creative ideas. You get to expand the scope of what your product can do. You can open up new revenue streams. I mean, it's incredible. But I personally believe that customers need to be play a role in every type of product development. I think another good example, though, and this is a really big one right now that gets me excited, is when it comes to building products for your employees. I mean, all these companies right now are retooling and going through digital transformation and doing all of these really incredible things. If your employees aren't at the epicenter of your product development process, you are not going to get anywhere close to what you think the outcome will be in building software.
Well, and also you have this expectation where you're doing this great project and everybody's going to be happy, and you release it and people don't like it. They don't use it. The UI that you thought was so intuitive is not intuitive. And it happens a lot, not just with software, but with all kinds of initiatives where if you don't keep the employees involved, keep people involved who are actually going to use it, you just miss the mark, no matter how good intentions you are. So now, will you talk about your company for a moment now, Jonathon? I'm just curious how you guys are structured as far as, so you're really helping. It sounds like you're helping on the strategic side, you're helping on the design side, but you're also very much attached to engaging the potential user base, customer base of whatever you're developing.
Yeah. So the way that our company is set up, which is Emerge, we're focused on two major aspects: creating products and growing products. And so what we come in and do is we'll help on the strategy. And so part of that is identifying your core customers, those that can get the maximum amount of value from your idea and the product that you want to create, or refining insights into that customer base if you have a product that is underperforming or you're trying to scale. And then we're also helping them improve that customer experience and then bringing development practices to our clients so that they can have products that can grow and scale with that success.
Cool. So it sounds like with this medical healthcare, whatever product, that you guys were able to have a success. And it really came back to a lot of pieces in the whole process of having the right strategy, really defining the clear, measurable outcomes you wanted to achieve, and then kind of testing against those as you went through the development and the testing phase before the product was released. Am I understanding correctly?
That's absolutely it. And I think one thing just to share with those that are listening is that we were able to test a lot of that before a single line of code was ever written. So the fact that we could have that insight and actually test that, we knew before they made the investment that we could actually, have a huge financial impact. And we were building a business case, not on hypotheticals or goals, which is pretty commonly how they're developed, but actual customer feedback that could tell us if we could deploy this, even at 50% of what our testing group told us, we could have, massive implications for the entire hospital network and driving their revenue and success going forward. And so it was a no-brainer after that.
I really like what you're saying. And it reminds me of something I was told many years ago and a lot of people don't understand this, either that have these products that they want to improve or that want to start making, a digital product. And what I was told, and please confirm whether this is correct or not, but I was told that the best products that are done, you spend typically 60% of your investment on writing a great spec, including the UI, which it sounds like what you guys did. And then the coding's easy. And then it flows. But most people don't spend that upfront time. And like you said on the first example, the disaster, they're winging it, maybe without knowing it, and just driving forward. Type A.
That is spot on. I mean, in working on the research for my book, I interviewed hundreds of people and business leaders and looking at their businesses. And, those that are outperforming consistently are doing two things. They don't skip steps. So they're not taking shortcuts. Everybody, people love a good shortcut. I get it. But there are steps you just cannot skip. They end up biting you and, causing massive issues down the road. And two is they have an unrelenting focus on building alignment around the problem. Those two things you can see consistently when companies are succeeding that's happening. Those two things every time.
And it's a rabbit trail that I don't want to go too deep on, but do you have great UI people? The user interface these days is so critical, and so many development teams do not have good UI designers who are on the team. And so that it either has to be another resource that's brought in, or sometimes it's not recognized and stuff is released that really is not very efficient because it's more difficult to understand.
We're very fortunate. We have an incredible design team at Emerge. And I think one of the key things about our team that is wonderful is that they really understand when it comes to product that you can make it look amazing. It can be as pretty as you want, but it has to be useful and it has to be functional. And there is this really, really careful and delicate balance in great design. I think, people really talk about how amazing Apple is and the way that they design products and the way that they design software. Design increases the utility and value of their products. It does not get in the way of the usability of their products. And so, you'll run into it. You could probably, any of us could go on our phone and probably find half a dozen apps in about 10 seconds that just the design is getting in the way. And it's like, okay, well, no, the design is there to elevate the experience and the functionality and help solve the problem that you're trying to solve. And so when design is really there to serve the user, not just wow them, that's when products really find an incredible connection with their customer base.
Yeah. And it always surprises me that I've been in the computer industry since 1982. That's 39 years. And when I use a product and, I can't figure out how to navigate it. And I think, I'm not an engineer, but I should be able to figure out how to navigate something. And some people just don't seem to do good user testing. Anyway, everybody wants to know, how do I make $400 million?
Well, first, have an amazing product.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's a minor detail.
To be very well funded.
Yeah.
But in all sincerity, in this case, we're really fortunate. We got to work with one of the largest machine learning software companies in the world, growing exponentially year over year. And part of their growth trajectory was to start to build a suite of internal tools. And the focus was really phenomenal on their part. They really understood from the very beginning, alignment was essential. They were aligned at the individual level, the team level, they were aligned as an organization, and they knew that to maintain market fit, to make sure their product was as successful and competitive as it possibly could be, that their number one goal, no matter whether it was internal or not, was to increase customer value. That was it. It was super, super clear and specific. And it was just to come into that level of focus and with how fast, they're running was just phenomenal. Great leadership, great team management, and really empowered teams. And so those teams, they could make key decisions, they could move quickly, and they could really make sure that they were directly able to engage customers and prospective customers and learn from them. So they were really challenging their own assumptions at every step of the way. And what we ended up doing is building a suite of tools to enable their sales teams and to their partners around the world to unlock opportunities for their existing customer base. And when they could see that, it was easy. It was all of a sudden, A, B, okay, I see how exactly they're connected. Now I have real-time insights. I have a reason to connect with my customer. I can provide them tangible value. It's worth them, taking time to talk to me. And I can incrementally and immediately start to improve their business and help them meet their goals. And it wasn't a pitch. It was spot on. I'm driving value. And they made that investment.
Can you give me like some specific examples of how they defined something and went after it? So what I'm looking for is, you give me kind of this overview, but give me a specific. What exactly were they looking for? I mean, you don't have to give away who the company is, but can you give me, it's a little more granular so I can get the concept better.
Sure. So in this particular client's case, what they really did is they started to look at, with their product, how is the customer using the product? In what ways? And they really started to break it down. So how is their product helping drive operations? How is it helping them manage risk? How is it helping them, look at operational efficiencies? And they started to look at each dimension. And then instead of going just an inch deep, they went a mile. They wanted to understand how does that impact in any possible way our customers if we can improve and take how that product is creating that value and actually bubble to the surface in real time insights that can help them save money or mitigate that risk or find new opportunities to increase their revenue in what they're doing in team efficiencies. And so they explored dozens of scenarios, and then they really honed in and they got super, super laser focused. And they said, okay, well, we've got maybe 10, 15 great ideas of things we could do. Where can we make the biggest impact? What do we have the best expertise, better than anybody else, to address? And can we capitalize on that? And they really honed in on just a handful of those things that they could do with their available resources, knowing the constraints of the market, and then how they could tackle it in a beneficial way. And that level of specificity, when they were aligned, allowed them to move super fast.
Okay, but wait a minute. How long did it take them to figure out that level of specificity?
It took them, from identifying the opportunity and the need for it to getting to their first version of the product and starting to unlock value was 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
So in the software world, it was fast.
Yeah. So that's fast overall, but I'm curious if you break that down even further, not getting to their first product, but remember you talked about the importance of really nailing down exactly what you want to do and writing so how long did it take to nail down exactly what they wanted to do? And then how long did it take to get the spec written where they could get to that first phase or the full release?
So to get to the first part of that, where there was a really clear spec on how they were going to deliver that value, took about 6 months to really get that clarity and that focus. And then from that point, then engineering could get turned on and then they could start to move really fast. One of the key things that they decided on as we were working together was also we actually never stopped the speccing process. So we really focus on continuous discovery, learning, and design as the product was also being built. And so I think that was a really key thing for them because we were able, by the time things were starting to get built and being tested, we already had the next set of specs to increase the value of the platform. We'd already talked to customers, validated what we thought we knew, figured out what we didn't know and what we needed to explore more. So while engineering started, we were still going full steam, and that never stopped.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're really doing a very excellent job at the lean startup model, the way the guy laid it out in that book. So I want to go back though. So as far as if I'm understanding you correctly, the research and the conclusions took 6 months before any spec writing. Am I understanding that right?
The research and developing that spec took 6 months.
And developing the spec. So by the end of the 6 months, you had clear, measurable outcomes, but you also had at least some of the UI designed. So you were able to take that out to some potential customers, users, whatever, and confirm that the direction you were going was going to be well received and going to help people and improve their efficiencies or achieve whatever. Am I understanding correctly?
That's right. We were able to actually develop that concept, that get feedback on, that specification and what we thought would be the right solution, and be it before development was ever started within that time frame.
And it sounds like the way you're working is that you're working where you are supplementing existing resources often. You can operate as a full development team by yourself, but often you're going in, particularly on these larger organizations, and you're kind of supplementing the expertise that they already have, whether that's, a large team or whether it's a small team. Am I understanding correctly?
That's one of the key scenarios. In this scenario is really interesting. So our work is split about 50-50 between supplementing and adding more expertise and capabilities to an organization. The other half is where an organization needs to stand up a product team, an experienced product team that has the processes and capabilities. And we are essentially operating as that internal product team as a whole for our client. And so we're driving that with usually an executive sponsor, but we are able to be that entire team for them, which is phenomenal because what happens is we get to prove the product, take them through the process. And by the time they start to decide to commit permanent resources and staff up around that product, they hire up and we pair with them and set them up for success so they can operate at a high performance level. And then we phase out. And so that's what we did with this particular client. We were the entire product team working with the subject matter experts for this product. And then we phased out over a 3-year period so they could completely own and take over the product. And that allowed us to create this incredible velocity in launching pad for them that they couldn't get any other way.
Yeah. And then going back to your book, Alignment, and give the audience the full title of the book again.
Alignment, Overcoming Internal Sabotage and Digital Product Failure.
Internal sabotage. Sorry, I just like that term. So when you're talking alignment, if I'm understanding you correctly, there's a lot of ways that you have to align, but the most critical one that gets lost a lot of times or de-emphasized or not enough time is spent on, it sounds like, is this real connection with the potential user or customer. Am I on track?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look out there statistically, most products fail for a lack of market fit, which is not knowing your customer, not being able to engaging them in the process. And so that is a huge issue. There are a lot of other issues that definitely follow that can cause massive problems for organizations. But that is fundamentally where it usually starts. I will say this though, and that can get in the way. And, I have to say this because it's in the title of my book. Internal sabotage, you'll find, is usually not an issue of the customer not being accessible. I just have to do, it's usually an issue of ego in the organization and not being willing or understanding the importance of engaging that customer. And so I would say ego from an internal perspective is the ultimate killer of a great product and idea, whereas not connecting with your customer and getting them involved is maybe not having a process that allows you to engage them in an effective way.
That's interesting because I think that point, internal sabotage is not typically intentional. Very rarely, I would assume. Am I correct there?
I would say I have yet to run across it where it was an intentional thing that happened, but it does happen most often.
Yes, and you say ego. Over my course of 64 years of life, and then the consulting I've been doing over the past 15, 16 years, and just what I've learned, I find that we all have wounds and we deal with them different ways from our life experience. And it might be ego, but I heard somebody talk. Actually, Brian Post says this in some of his writings on working with kids who've gone through trauma, that there's two primary emotions. I don't think he's the first guy to say it. That's where I got it. There's two primary emotions that drive us. One is fear and one is love. And if you kind of go down, someone's coming from one or the other. And so I can see from a fear base, you might lock into ego to try to control and drive an outcome, and you're just blocking certain information. But on the flip side, you could be coming from a quote unquote love, type of motivation. But once again, allow yourself to be too general and not drill down like you just talked about. That company what did you say, drilled down a mile on the data?
Yeah.
So they made certain they could have that success. And I think that that's where I would encourage our audience. I mean, I'm going to close this off now just because of the time, but I would encourage our audience, and I think, Jonathon, you've said this before, so stop me if I'm wrong, but to get in touch with you, if nothing more, for just a conversation, because sometimes that outside influence can see things that you're overlooking, even though you're working your hardest, you're trying to work smart, but you're just overlooking because you're trying to move maybe at a pace that's not the right pace. So how would they get in touch with you? How would they go to your website, learn more? And then, of course, your book, I assume, well, I know because I looked, is on Amazon and it's everywhere. So
the great way to get in touch, there's also a bunch of free resources, is to visit our website, which is emergeinteractive.com. I'd also highly encourage, if anybody's interested in the book or looking for the tools that come in the book, they can go to productalignment.com. It's also available, as you said, on Amazon and iTunes. So it's easily accessible to anybody who's interested. And I would love to hear from anybody who wants to have that conversation. And I do think that, just to parrot back on one thing that you said, I do think a lot of great leaders are out there coming from a place of love, but they also have to maintain perspective. And I think the skills and expertise of leaders is changing as we move into more and more digitally enabled businesses. And so that's another conversation for another day, but it's an important thing, I think, to leave people with, to understand that the skill set is changing for leaders, and it's an important thing to be aware of.
Yeah, and I'm going to add a closing thought there too, is that just from my own learning, is that we like to think that we're in control of a time frame, but often we're not. And if people could be more committed to what you talk about with alignment, that I want to make certain I'm aligned before I'm really investing a lot of resources, before I'm really trying to rush out into the marketplace. It's like the guy in the old days who wouldn't ask for directions, but just drive faster in the wrong direction, thinking he's going to get there sooner. We really need to be aware of that these days. There's so many nuances in what's going on in the marketplace, and so many things can shift suddenly. And yet I think that even if there's a sudden shift, if you're really well aligned, you're going to be in a much better position to shift with the market, shift with the economy, than if you're missing a few data points, those data points might be total failure, not covering them, even if you're 80% right otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, Jonathan, I appreciate you getting back with us. Emerge Interactive, get in touch there. I hope you get a few phone calls from people who want to talk to you. And, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing what's going on and giving the insights.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me back, David. It's always a pleasure.